over 40, single, and no kids. What does the life of someone like that look like? I'm Carrie, and this is Saunders Sisterhood. This is a YouTube channel for the single and childless, not by choice person. Today, I'm going to share a little bit about my life. I am in my mid-40s, I am single, and I don't have any children. I am childless, not by choice. I always thought I would have children. I wanted children. I did things in order to help prolong the chances of me having children. And for a variety of different circumstances, it didn't happen for me. How did I end up here if I wanted to have kids? I think our society projects a mentality that if you want kids, you'll have them. Where there's a will, there's a way. Never give up. All of these things that imply, I think especially if you're in the United States, that if you want something, you can get it. Don't give up until you have it. Let nothing stop you. And sometimes life doesn't work out that way. So a little bit about how I ended up here. So I got married young. I was 24 years old and got married thinking it was forever. I was head over heels, couldn't imagine myself ever getting divorced. Thought this is the person. All of those things that everybody goes into a marriage with, especially when you're young and you do it and you don't maybe have the life experience to recognize that life can sometimes happen and life can throw a ton of bombs at your feet. I was 24, I got married. I was married about 3 years and then very unexpectedly got divorced. I felt very blindsided by it. I won't get into the details of what happened because it's just boring and really cliche, but I ended up getting divorced. And I very much struggled after this. I had a lot of ideas of what that meant to be divorced. I was divorced at 27, which is right around the time a lot of other people are getting married, falling in love. I felt like I didn't know anybody else that was divorced. I had a lot of ideas about what that meant. And then I also was really missing my ex-husband, and that just is what it is. I say all of that because it really impacted my thoughts and my motivation to get involved in another long-term relationship. And it took me a lot of years to kind of get to a place where I was even thinking about dating or engaging in that again. Not that I wasn't dating during that time, but I certainly wasn't dating thinking marriage. That was not something I wanted to do. Not that I was against marriage, but I was very afraid of it now at this point. And so in all honesty, I just think I lost a lot of years in that trauma. I mean, it is what it is. During this time, I definitely focused more on work. I was really getting more of my self-worth and value out of work. I felt like work was something that I can control, right? It was that thing that felt to me that if I did work hard enough, if I did follow this sequence of events, then these things would work out for me and I would be able to have success in this area of my life, feeling like I had completely failed in this other area of my life. So work became the coping skill, I guess, is how I would describe that. For better or worse, it just was. You know, I think because I was a little gun shy in the relationship department, I just never found somebody that I thought, I trust this person enough to marry and have kids with. I also very much did not want to have kids outside the context of marriage and the way I had always pictured family. So all of those things just were circulating all at the same time. With my head down, just kind of focused on work, like the years sort of passed quickly. And I did a good job in work. Like I am at a level in my career where I'm like, whoa, this isn't sort of where I'd set out to be. So what was this like? Well, as I mentioned earlier, there was lots of anxiety, lots of self-blame, lots of shame in particular, and tons of negative self-talk that really was just feeding this beast that I think was also keeping me single. No one wants to be with me. You're not pretty enough. You are leftovers. You know, just like really negative stuff that I don't believe anymore for the most part. But it was just flooding my brain at the time. And when you have thoughts in your head, you're not projecting openness or you even want to be in a relationship, right? And so I was projecting that out there, and that's what I got in return. As the years started to go, particularly as I started to get into my mid-30s, I definitely started to panic a little bit. Like it was this slow, like anxiety creep to where as I started to get into my mid-30s, later 30s, I panicked. I thought, oh, wow, this really may not happen, but still had some hope that it would. One of the things I did in order to help elongate my ability to have kids is I did freeze my eggs. I think I was 38 or 39 when I did that. It was expensive. It's definitely a process to go through, but I did do that successfully. And that was a little bit of, I felt like I had some breathing room. I was able to exhale a little bit. I knew that wasn't a sure thing, but I felt like, okay, you're controlling the controllables. Like the logical side of my brain was like, you're doing what you can do in order to make this happen. By the time I was 40, I'd froze my eggs. And then I'm gonna skip a little bit, but then come back to it. When I think I was 43, maybe 44, I ended up having some abnormal cells after they did a biopsy, and everything turned out fine, thankfully. But it took a couple of different biopsies and it took a couple of different procedures in order to rule out that everything was good and that everything was fine. And the final procedure that they had to do in order to rule that out was a hysterectomy. So I ended up having to have a hysterectomy, which by that time I definitely was feeling like I'm not gonna have kids. Like this is over, I'm too old now, I haven't even found somebody, like kind of all of those things. And I had worked through acceptance by that time. So it wasn't sort of this collapsible grief, but the grief spiked back up. Definitely put a period at the end of that sentence. And so I ended up having to have a hysterectomy. That all happened very fast. So while the kind of anxiety and grief was this slow build, and then the grief jumped up around my 40th birthday. There was probably 2 years where it was significant grief. Not that the whole 2 years was like the depths of it, but I was definitely processing through a lot. Then it dwindled and then peaked back up around the hysterectomy. And now I have a very clear, direct finality to the fact that I will not have kids. The reason I share that piece of the story is because oftentimes when you're childless, not by choice, or you're childless by circumstance in particular, it's because of a bunch of different things that occur. It's not just one thing. And even if it was just one thing, that's okay too. However, I think there is this sense of if somebody doesn't want to have kids, it's because they don't want them. And people don't realize that there's all these other things that play a part in it. Going back to when I was 40, what was that like? Turning 40 was hard. I actually had a wonderful birthday. I hung out with my friends. We went downtown. It was a really great time. However, 40 was like falling off a cliff. It was like, that's it. You're 40 now. You are single. You don't have kids. This is not what every other 40-year-old woman's life looks like. That's what it felt like to me. And so this is when the grief really, really hit hard, because I was like, instead of feeling like, I don't know that this is going to happen, I had this feeling of this isn't going to happen. Like, whoa, the universe is really going to do me this way. And that's hard to swallow, especially when you look around and it feels like everybody else is living this life that you want. And so thoughts of why me? Why not me? What it is about me? And I think some of those things are important to look at, because I definitely played a part in the circumstances. It's not like all of this happened to me. I think I probably could have done some work sooner on the trauma and impact of that early divorce, some beliefs that I was carrying around related to that. So I definitely am not saying that I didn't play a part in that, but I look around and see a lot of dysfunctional people pairing up and having kids. The other aspect of this is because all of this grief is something that isn't happening versus being related to an event. I wasn't sure who to turn to around this. People weren't sure whether to bring it up or not. I don't even know that people knew what to say. People weren't even sure what part I was probably grieving. I didn't even know it was grief that I was feeling originally. It complicates it because it's this non-event. It's this thing that's just not happening over a long period of time versus an event that's marked that people then know how to respond to more traditional forms of grief. So there's a loneliness to it and a self-blame around it because you're not sure what's happening in terms of your feelings and when it will stop and will this ever feel better? Because not a lot of people are talking about it. That is what it was like. Now, what is it like? What is my life like now as somebody who is single and is childless, not by choice? Now, I have times where I think about the what ifs or something occurs and I get a little like twinge of hurt. Right now, the most consistent time I feel that is like when I see my dog with a little kid and like the cuteness around that. So that's a bit difficult, but I don't get stuck in it and I'm able to acknowledge it, see it. And then what I do is I'm able to see the joy and value in my dog that I'm getting. So things are much better now, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Not that it's perfect and not that I don't have, a wide spectrum of feelings around it over the course of time, but things are better now. And I recognize nobody's life is perfect. There was a period of time where I'm like, if only, or if I had what they had, if I have what they had. And now my brain is able to wrap itself around, yeah, but nobody's life is perfect. And while they might have these things, they don't have these things that you have. Trying not to compare because you just don't know. And nobody's life is perfect, no matter what scenario they're in. I no longer feel like I'm living this second-rate life. And while this might sound harsh, I don't feel like now I'm just engaging in things to pass the time while I'm waiting to die. I know that sounds harsh, but when you are in a culture that puts so much emphasis on motherhood, family, this is your purpose in life, I never started to live until I became a mother, all of those things. When that doesn't happen for you, it can feel like, oh, I'm living this life that isn't reaching its higher purpose. And that I know that that's not true. Now, I will say that I do believe friendships are impacted by one friend having children and the other friend not having children. Not that you can't have friendships, that you can't have deep friendships with people who have kids. A really good friend of mine has kids, and we've, for the most part, that hasn't been a big point of separation. I will say I think she is more than most, has multiple aspects of her life that she cultivates. So I think that's very helpful. But just the reality of it is during certain seasons of parenthood, people have different availability. That's just a fact. And that's a really hard season to be in when you're the friend that has more availability potentially, but also may not want to do things like going to the birthday parties or meeting up at the kids' soccer games, like things where a lot of mom friends get together around because their schedules are more aligned, right? And so that does impact friendships. It just does. It's hard and it's okay to acknowledge it. And it doesn't mean anybody's a crappy friend, and it doesn't mean people don't like you anymore, or, like you don't like them because their schedule isn't aligned, or they don't like you because your schedule isn't aligned. It's just the really hard part is you're veering off on different paths. You start to kind of have less in common. It's hard. Holidays can look different as well. I think a lot of holidays are very child focused. you know, my holidays look different, right? My holidays are less about the hustle and bustle of the holidays, the Santa, you know, if it's Christmas, and it's more about kind of rest and relaxation. I like that. And I think a lot of the larger culture and a lot of the ways people talk about the holidays are more in line with the hustle and bustle of the holidays, what's Santa doing, the families in the matching pajamas, the kids getting their picture taken with Santa. You know, you can get overloaded with that during that time. And so it's important to have a good core group of people during that time. That's how I experience the holidays. So I think stressors, you know, I have stressors too. Just because I'm single and don't have kids doesn't mean that I have no stress. My worries are different than somebody else's worries, but that's the case no matter if you have kids or not. You know, I'm not worried about my child's health per se, but there are a lot of crossovers that we just have as humans, right? So I worry about things like work, finances, my family's health, now my health. What am I going to eat today? You know, these are things that kind of remind you that we have more commonalities than differences in a lot of ways. Having said that, I do think that because I am single and childless, not by choice, I do think I spend more time alone than the average person who is partnered and has kids, especially since I work from home. The good news is I don't mind that though, especially since now that I have Gavin. Gavin is my Great Dane. I got him at the end of 2020. I'm also more of an introvert and a homebody, so I need to have some alone time. If I were partnered and have kids, I think that would be one of the hardest parts about it. And I do have a partner in the future. I think that will be something that I will still maintain, is having my own life. Not that people who are married can't have their own life, but no matter what my life looks like, I'm going to need some alone time. In fact, not having any alone time is probably one of my worst nightmares. Actually, even when I was a kid, I'd like to have some like quiet time alone, like reading in my bedroom or things like that. So what is my life like? What is like the daily parts of my life look like? Well, I work. I mentioned earlier in the video that I used to work a lot. I still work a lot, but I am definitely trying to reshift and rebalance that. I'm absolutely trying to stick to the 40-hour work week. I also try and work out. I try and work out less in terms of the aesthetics, but more about it helps me feel more confident. It helps me feel stronger. I'm hopeful and wanting it to mean that I'll be able to live independently for longer and be healthier for longer, be more mobile in my old age. I love spending time with my dog. I love experiencing new things with him. I like going to the dog park with him. I like snuggling up with him. I also like to watch a lot of YouTube. I like to read. I like to go on walks. And more recently, I've been spending a lot of my winter in Florida because I have the flexibility to do that, where I'm able to experience more of the beach, warmer weather, new places. I have moments where I feel the sting of not being partnered or not having kids, but those are less often. I don't sink quite as quickly in those instances. I don't get stuck in those instances anymore. I definitely have negative self-talk still. That's something that I kind of always try and work on. If I were partnered and had kids, I think I'd figure out something else to have negative self-talk around. That's just sort of the thing in my life that I have to work on often. But I'm also trying to reconceptualize what relationship might look like, or what retirement might look like, or what aging looks like. I think, you know, we've all grown up with this very narrow view of what those things are. And I love this idea of expanding that out a little bit to creating the things that might work for you. Like maybe I have a relationship where I'm partnered, but we never live together, right? Or maybe I have a long-term partner, but it doesn't go to marriage. I don't know. But the idea of being able to think a little bit more outside the box, and that there's actually multiple lanes you can take and not just one, is something that I contemplate and think about. So that's kind of how I spend my day. It's pretty basic, but I think everybody's is. I think we all sort of live this life that's pretty routine. And then I fill it in with doing some things that I like to do. Okay, how did I get to acceptance? A lot of things. You know, just like it takes a lot of things to sort of get to the place of being single and childless, not by choice. It also took a lot of different things to get to a place of acceptance. The first one, and I think the biggest one, is I found a therapist who I trusted and I liked. My therapist, I'm pretty sure, has kids. So I don't think you need to see a therapist that is childless in order to get benefit from it. And I understand why people want that. You know, I'm a therapist that in my private practice, I work a lot with women who are childless, but because I have a passion for this group of people, because I think they go underrepresented a lot and are misunderstood a lot. But you don't have to have a therapist that is childless. And I found this to be really important. It was this consistent person that I was able to practice sharing how I felt around it. I could be messy around it. I didn't have to really worry or think about or feelings around it. It helped me get vocabulary and really kind of identify how I felt and the possibilities that could be different. So I strongly recommend seeing a therapist in the same way that we recommend other people who are going through grief to access a therapist. Finding community is also really important. I had no idea that there was a childless, not by choice community out there. I tell this story in other videos where I just kind of like Googled at 1 a.m. depressed and childless woman. Communities came up, videos came up, and I found that really helpful. I joined some of those communities, connected with some other women that were in my spot, even went to a few meetups that were focused for women who didn't have kids. There's just something about knowing you're not the only one that is very healing. You know, that's the case in a lot of different types of difficult things in life. Community support, knowing you're not alone, itself can be healing. So I strongly encourage you to look at community. Now I know that we all have different comfort levels around it. If you need a place to start, think about Sonder Sisterhood. It's low risk, it's free. You don't have to go sit in a room with a bunch of strangers necessarily. You can come here and know you're not alone. Another thing that helped me, and this may sound a little bit odd, is the hysterectomy. The hysterectomy was very, very difficult. I still struggle around the fact that I had a hysterectomy for a variety of different ways, but one of the flip sides of that coin is at least there was a period now at the end of the sentence. The idea that I should be doing something different or I could be doing something to make this happen kind of went away when it came to that, because, you know, a hysterectomy kind of took that option off the table. And so I was able to kind of put a period at the end of that sentence and then move forward knowing it was done and that there really isn't anything I can do. It also kind of, the grief came in because it kind of dashed any sort of embers of hope that were there, which was hard to deal with, but now I know exactly what I'm working with. And so that was a little bit helpful. And finally, my dog, Gavin. Now, I would not recommend getting a dog just because you need a dog in order to help you feel better. It's a lot of work. It's a financial commitment. There's a lot that goes into it. And for me, I was ready to get a dog. I wanted this dog, and it has been life-changing, to be quite honest. Gavin gives me a reason to move my body every day. He gives me a reason to find fun things for us to do. I don't feel alone all the time. He forces me to recognize that he needs me, and I want to make sure that I'm giving him the best life possible. So he's a motivator in my life. He motivates me to stop working at the end of the day. He motivates me to find fun things for us to do. He motivates me to take pictures and document these fun things in my life. He gives me things to look forward to, if I'm really honest. Okay, what would I tell others who are single and childless, not by choice? Well, the first thing I would do is encourage them, like I said, to find a therapist if you feel like you need someone to talk to you and you do not have that in your life. It's okay to see a therapist. It's healthy to see a therapist. More and more people are seeing a therapist. Life is hard. The second thing I would tell people, again, is find community. Even if it's through YouTube or books, if that's where you start, but find things that help you feel not alone and to help you recognize you're not the only one and you're not doomed to this second-rate life. Find community. The last thing that I want to leave you with is that you aren't alone, even if it feels like it. You can live a life that is meaningful, purposeful, and fun, and that even if you're single, even if you're childless, not by choice, there are still things that you can look forward to, that you can get excited about, and you can feel that promise of the future again. I don't say that to say that it's not really difficult and that there's not a ton of grief involved in this. And you can get through it. You can get excited again. You can look forward to the future again. And you can feel hopeful again. So that's a little bit about my experience as someone who is single and childless, not by choice. And I would love for you to subscribe and join our community at Sondra Sisterhood for the single and childless, not by choice person.